Fighter's Guide presents, Is it worth it to resolve a conflict? This seems to be the question that jets through the minds of most people when it's suggested to talk it out after a conflict. You're telling somebody about a scenario between you and another person, along with your reactions, emotions, and opinions on what transpired. It's rarely positive. You're usually some form of offended, and the action you're taking now is most easily identifiable as venting. Are you going to talk to them about it? You've heard the term deer in headlights? That's the look you get in response to this question. Well, or some close facsimile is usually what comes next. That means nope, no plans to talk to the person about the interaction. If you want to hear the most common obstacles to resolving conflicts and things you can do to get around them, then stick around. There's a principle to sum this up in the end. You could have been infuriated or incensed, bewildered or bemused, but when confronted with what seems like the most obvious answer in the world, you backpedal. Why? Well, it could be many things, or any combination thereof, such as feeling social pressure to get along, or thinking it will just turn out to be an argument and therefore more effort than it's worth. Perhaps you hate or are scared of confrontation. All of those reasons that prevent you from simply going back to the individual and discussing what transpired with the goal of a resolution and a plan to avoid similar instances are the easy way out. Easy equals lazy, at least in this case. You're likely just telling yourself a story and are ignoring your authentic voice. If you weren't ignoring it, you wouldn't be venting about the interaction. In this video, we'll explore the 5 most common reasons people avoid resolving conflict. But first, let me jump ahead and give you the answer to the question posed at the beginning. Yes, it is worth it. Always. If there is one thing that should always be considered the hill worth dying on, it is relationships. How you go about the conversation, of course, is critical in determining the outcome, but the simple question of whether or not you should talk something out is invariably affirmative. Let's take a look at the 5 most common reasons people avoid conflict and some ways to overcome the challenges. We'll start with the most obvious. Number 1. Imagining the worst that could happen. Depending on the relationship with the individual, or lack thereof, this could range from mutual annoyance to a bar brawl. Disclaimer. If you're telling somebody they've come across a little aggressive or have offended you would result in violence, perhaps this is not an individual worth spending a single thought on. Don't bother getting something off your chest to an individual with this tendency. Just get away, and get away fast. Now let's move closer to reactions where most people and circumstances reside. They could be annoyed, the conversation could go poorly, and what was already tense is now made problematic. Is it really the topic then? Doesn't that sound like a relationship that was destined for this tension at some point or another? You'll see a version of this prompt occasionally in these videos. What did you do to cause it? We only have control over ourselves. Here's another way of asking this. What would they say if they were asked about the exchange? How do you think they would view your side of the conversation? I'll save you the trouble by telling you this universal truth. Nobody is the villain in their own play. Or movie, for those that don't prefer theater. Individuals can be selfish, but they don't think they're being evil. They're just acting in their own interests, much like the rest of us. Everybody's lens is shaped by their personal experience, and the factors that create that lens are infinite. Culture, parenting, region, class, education, friends, upbringing, trauma, religion, neuroassociations, and more. We can go through life being offended at what people offer us, or we can ask them about it, be curious about their motivations, and have a dialogue about how we can meet in the middle. The actual worst that can happen is usually only mild discomfort. It can be awkward to confront somebody whether the topic is significant or not. They get visibly disturbed by the conversation, you state your feelings and observations, they react with whatever makes sense to them in the moment, and you live to see another day. The most likely scenario is that even if they seem defensive in the moment, their behavior changes towards you in the future situations like this one, because you have either drawn a boundary or brought a behavior to their attention they were not strictly aware of. Has anybody ever told you something about yourself that you were embarrassed to discover? Sucks, right? But maybe it prompted you to make a change, and maybe it's been for the better. So allow them the same opportunity to process and learn from it, because that's a huge part of great communication. Everybody helping everybody else become the best they can possibly be. But what's the best that could happen? You both learn something about yourselves and each other. Your relationship is strengthened. You both find some fulfillment in the act of overcoming an obstacle and finding a mutual resolution. You feel vindicated. You establish a valuable boundary that was likely to be a desperately needed one. Number 2. It's not the kind of relationship that I can have that kind of talk in. Once in a while, this is true. This is usually in reference to a work relationship with a superior or another coworker that it doesn't seem appropriate to hash things out with. Let's really take a look at this under the same microscope. If you have a boss that is overly critical and conducts themselves in a way that legitimately makes you uncomfortable, I refer you back to the bar brawl scenario. Is this really the job for you? Is there an HR department you can discuss it with? Are you risking your employment by having a conversation about an interaction you've had with this person? Perhaps it's time to start chasing those dreams and get out of this abusive relationship you've gotten yourself into. If it's more about your discomfort with challenging authority, well, welcome to the new millennium. We don't or shouldn't have those kinds of work environments anymore. They don't work. We all know they don't work. All you're trying to do is have a conversation to get to a place that is more effective for the both of you. Any leader who isn't interested in that has no business being in charge of people, and you can only do your part by leaving that job. Number 3, it's not a big deal. Then why are we talking about it? If this was realistic, then nobody would complain about anything ever. This is one of the ultimate hiding places people stash themselves behind. An effort to convince themselves they're taking the moral high ground by not dredging up small issues and by claiming that the small stuff doesn't bother them. Except we're talking about it. You know what we're not talking about? The itch just above your elbow or the fact that you ran out of toothpaste this morning. Those are not a big deal, and we're not talking about them because they don't matter. You know what matters? This emotional scab created by an interaction you had with another person that you keep scratching off in your head. It matters. Come on out from behind your rock and let's come up with a plan to heal it. Acknowledge that it matters enough and decide to fix it if you can. Number 4. It's better to get along. Is it? Did you know that resentment causes stress that is pervasive and can be diabolically undetectable? You're also the one building the walls, not them. You can try to convince yourself that you're making this decision because you're a nice person, but what you're actually doing is denying yourself a truthful, wholesome experience that could potentially lead to the development of 2 people, not just yourself. In the end, you could at least be serving yourself by having done everything in your power to make the situation right. And lastly, number 5. I know what I need to know about that person now, and they're not worth it. We're all guilty of this one. Nobody is everything they are in a single moment. You've certainly had moments where you didn't represent the best of yourself. We all have. Is it at all possible this person was going through one of those rough moments? This is like getting pissed off at people who cut you off on the freeway. What if their pregnant wife in the passenger seat just had her water break? What if they just got a call about their child in imminent danger and they're rushing off for something life or death? Since you don't have the context, it's probably not worth it to burn any calories being upset by it. But when it comes to an interaction, you get to go back and ask what was going on. Don't pretend you're taking the high road when what's really happening is hiding behind a different rock. Whether the relationship is an acquaintance, a coworker, a spouse, a friend, or anybody you are likely to have repeated interactions with, every battle is worth fighting. Every discussion is worth having. Quite literally, if you get nothing else out of a discussion, you at least get practice towards handling larger or more intense issues. The principle? When it comes to relationships, if you're thinking about it, then it's worth discussing. The value of combining ideas supersedes the cost of any fear of causing discomfort. Thanks for watching the video, and be sure to subscribe for more like it. Click on the notification bell to be alerted to new videos.